Back in December, one of my viewers told me that Wuthering Waves 2.0 was gonna be heavily inspired on Italy, and if you're new or you're a regular that still doesn't know, I was born, raised and I still live in Italy, so who better than a 100% Italian person could comment on how the language has been used in a video game. So I downloaded Wuthering Waves and played through the entire version 1 in basically a week, so that when version 2.0 was released, I could immediately go to the new region and experience my own culture and language in the game. I gotta say I was left speechless, and trust me, it takes a lot to get me to shut up. The problem is that I was speechless because everything was butchered beyond recognition, and even though I really tried, I couldn't even find a way to justify or understand these unexplainable mistakes. But first, this is not a theory video, so I don't have to do my usual disclaimer while flying around, but I do need to clarify something that might end up being misunderstood, so this is probably the only slightly serious chapter of the video. As I said, I am Italian, and my standardized American accent is a result of 23 years of English studies plus my habit, that I still have today, to read the subtitles whenever I watch a TV show, a movie or even a video game, trying to match what the people are saying and the way they're saying it, so their accent, pronunciation, intonation, emotion. I basically dub the actors. As a consequence, but also because I started to become a translator, I understand how hard it is to reproduce sounds that don't exist in my own language, and when it comes to English, almost 90% of the sounds this language needs don't exist in Italian. So, when I'll comment on how the Italian words have been pronounced in Wuthering Waves, I am not complaining about the voice actors who have done a wonderful job at voicing the characters. It's not their fault if they pronounce Italian words wrong, it's not even their job to figure out what the right pronunciation is. They are simply following the instructions they have been given, and they are saying those words the way they have been instructed to. So if there's someone who's at fault, it's the people who gave them those instructions. I wouldn't dream to complain about them not rolling the R's like we do in Italy, especially considering there are tons of Italian people who can even roll those R's as well. With that out of the way, get into your unbelievably slow tub pop and let's get this video started. Understanding my main concern with Italian according to Wuthering Waves is pretty easy, because we don't really need to get very far into the game, we don't even need to go to the new region actually. When we spoke with the shorekeeper even before 2.0 was released, she dropped the name of the new region.
Rinascita.
Now, the word simply means rebirth, which makes sense story-wise, but that's definitely not how you say that word. And the problems are actually two here. First of all, the SCI Italian sound does exist in English, it's the sh sound, so it should have been she. But above all, they stress the wrong syllable. The right pronunciation is not
Rinascita,
but Rinascita. If I write the name of the region in a specific way, as you can see on the screen, that's how you say it. It's as simple as that. When it comes to this new region, we were invited to take part in the
Carnevale
by the
Montelli family,
in the city of
Ragunna.
I can kinda accept how they say Carnevale, the stress is on the right syllable, but in Italian we read every letter, so when a word ends in E, it's never silent. The correct pronunciation is Carnevale, but making that final E silent isn't really such a big deal, it didn't bother me one bit, to be honest. Montelli is a last name, and as such is not an Italian word, but I suppose they went for something similar to Romeo and Juliet, since in English the male protagonist is Romeo Montague, but in Italian he's Romeo Montecchi, and you can easily hear the similarities between Montecchi and Montelli. Now, apart from the double L sound, which is fine, the word Montelli was pronounced correctly. Ragunna instead is a fictional city, it sounds like a mix between Ragusa, a city in Sicily, and Ravenna, a city in Emilia-Romagna. But if Ragunna was an Italian word, that's actually how you would have read it. Even the way the people of Ragunna are called Ragunesi makes perfect sense in Italian, because that's a common way to define the citizens of a city. Now, as soon as the Narwhal almost still whipped us into the afterlife, the real butchering started, and pretty heavily. Brand, the only character I'm pulling for in 2.0, like I'm saving the guaranteed pull just for him, brought us on the ship where we found a little girl who definitely has never heard of claustrophobia. When he said her name, I felt the urge to unplug my PC to make it stop immediately. He said,
"All good, Roccia?"
and I said, "How did you call her?" Here's the thing, I knew Italian words were gonna be butchered before they even released the update, so when I saw her banner I was sure she was gonna be something like Roccia, but never in the entire universe could I have expected her name to be so brutally destroyed, like there's no way anyone could have even foretold something like that. Going back to
Roccia?
Although the double C sound is actually correct, it's basically the only thing that's right in her name, which is already a miracle, I honestly don't understand why they stress the I, which in Italian you wouldn't even hear in this specific case. The right pronunciation is Roccia, and it simply means rock, like those from a cliff. I would have been okay with Roccia, because for whatever reason English speakers do this all the time, like the head of the Team Rocket in English is Giovanni, while it's simply Giovanni. The I there simply turns the G sound into a G sound. If I write his name like this, you'll say it perfectly, while the girl in Wuthering Waves, it would be like this, you know, like gotcha, simple as that. Since we're talking about her, let's double down because she's a nice character, but oh my god the times I wanted to unplug the PC with her. Let's talk about her attack voiceovers. She can attack 3 times in a row by slamming down the enemy with a trolley from the sky, and this is where she becomes Super Mario, the worst representation of Italy ever seen up until she was created. The first thing she says is
Mamma mia!
And of course she says it correctly because Americans say it all the time, probably without even knowing what it actually means, but it sounds Italian so it's fun. Literally it means my mother, but it actually means oh my god. It doesn't particularly make sense that she says that, but I can justify it if I want it, so it's okay. The second line is
Avanti!
and this really doesn't make sense. Avanti on its own means in front, but it can mean come in if someone knocked on the door, or it could be next, like when in addition the jury is calling for the next contender, or it could also mean oh come on, tell the truth, something like that. Which one applies to her attack? I have no idea. Maybe next? Anyway, the last line is the worst one.
Figurati!
Let's start with the fact that it should have been figurati, because figurati does exist in Italian, but it's the plural form of an adjective and it means illustrated, so it's definitely not what she meant there. Figurati can really mean 2 things. It's either another way to say you're welcome, more like it's nothing or think nothing of it, or it could mean as if, about something that's obviously never gonna happen. I'll let you pick what she's supposed to mean with figurati there because I can't. So to summarize, mamma mia, avanti, figurati is basically oh my god, next, think nothing of it. What does that mean? If I were the writer, I would have gone for mamma mia, ancora, alla prossima. That is, oh my god, again, till next time, which sounds more like what a performer would say, but also the fact that she's fighting. Going back to Brand, he told us to try a specific kind of wine that he loves, called
Gocce di Divino?
so drops of the divine, and while the way both Brand and Zani said gocce was weird but still correct,
Divino.
this is completely wrong. It's divino, same stress syllable as divine in English. Maybe they wanted to make it sound less English and more Italian by changing the stress? I mean, it's not like there's actually an Italian person out there who's gonna point out how wrong it is. Wait, there is one though. I guess Italian people do exist. Next is the guy that people are going crazy about for whatever reason, and his name is
Cristoforo.
By that point, as soon as I read his name, I perfectly knew how he would have pronounced it. It was sadly obvious. Now, think back at your history class at school, when they talked about the guy who discovered America. In English, his name is either translated into Christopher Columbus, or they left it in Latin, Christophorus Columbus, so the stress is either on the first syllable, Christopher, or on the second one, Cristoforus. So when you look up the Italian version of it, you'd expect the stress to be on either of them, so either Cristoforo, which is extremely hard to say, or Cristoforo, which is how the name is actually pronounced in Italian, so why did he become
Cristoforo.
No one knows, but it's so bad. I mean, this is what happened when we met him again in Whisperwind Haven.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
Oh no, please don't
I
say him
am
again.
Cristoforo, a humble playwright
God.
grappling with modern trends.
Moving on to a character I actually appreciated in 2.0, Zani. I suppose her name comes from the Commedia dell'arte, the Zani, which is basically a servant, whose female alternative would actually be the Fantesca, also known in English as the Knave, but let's not go there. Anyway, the voice actress sounded kinda Italian, but there was something off about her accent, and I couldn't really figure out what it was, nor if she was simply trying to sound Italian as best as she could. That is until I simply realized that she is Greek, and everything suddenly made sense. I don't understand why her name is nowhere to be found despite having such a big role in 2.0, but it seems that she's Alexandra Metaxa, I'm sorry if I butchered her name, and I actually know this actress because she voiced Kira in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, basically my favorite Assassin's Creed of all time. I love that game with my whole soul.
This is Alexios, the one I told you about.
There's no way it's not her. That being said, she did say a few Italian words, and most of them were basically perfect because she can naturally roll the R's like we do in Italy.
Mercurio, trattoria Margherita, pizza tropicale. Alberto.
She said these words correctly, but then we went to the trattoria and Margherita just had to say
A Nuvola pasta.
I wouldn't even know how to translate it in English because it's weird even in Italian, but it should be something like cloud of pasta maybe? Well, it's impossible to get the word pasta wrong, the other word is actually pronounced Nuvola. I will ignore the fact that there's no cloud on the pasta, it's just an obscene amount of spaghetti with a ridiculous scoop of tomato sauce on top and what seems to be egg white, which makes my blood boil because it's beyond wrong, but this is not a cooking channel, so let's ignore that. I'll also ignore the fact that the owner of the trattoria, Margherita, is for whatever reason Irish, and don't get me wrong, I love that accent, it brings back wonderful memories because one of my university teachers was Irish, and I just loved hearing that accent. I'll also ignore the pizza tropicale being a simple pizza margherita with some pepperoni on top. You could ask for a pizza tropicale here in Italy, but when they'd stop laughing, they would bring you a pineapple pizza, which, by the way, I don't understand why we Italians become so defensive against it, when we put whatever we can think of on a pizza without thinking about it twice. Moving on, after the Vitrium dancer went crazy, we met the guy from the Pioneer Association, whose name is
Fulmine.
or
Fulmine.
depending on who's speaking. Zani actually says it better, although again the final E is never silent, while the guy himself turned his own name into something weird. The word that simply means lightning should have been Fulmine. Then he showed us his memory of the Vitrium dancer, and we saw a guy from the Phacelia family called
Mr. Gilberto.
and in Italian G plus I is G, while if we want to say G we need an H in the middle. So the correct pronunciation is Gilberto. We then went to the Cathedral of Mercury, where we met
Priest Alessio.
which is pronounced almost perfectly, there's just too much emphasis on the I, it's actually Alessio. Later on we met,
Carlotta.
and like before, almost perfect, but I'm not complaining, it's just technically Carlotta. When we arrived at the Averardo Vault, we heard a name from the Montelli family that Carlotta, but also everybody, the guy himself included, pronounced,
Uncle Capollo.
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 Capollo Montelli.
while the lady at the front desk pronounced.
Mr. Capollo is not in the vault.
This is not an Italian word, it's an Italian looking one, but the lady at the front desk pronounced it better, Capollo. Although every time I heard that name, I basically always heard Capollo, which is a kind of pork cured meat. Also, just for fun, even the conductor's name tricked me into thinking about food. I guess I was hungry back then, even though her name isn't Italian at all. She's Frolova, but all I could read was provola, a type of cheese, a really tasty one if I may add. Anyway, the last name I want to talk about was actually never pronounced. We only heard this guy from the Montelli family speaking and we could read his name, so just in case his name ends up being butchered in the future, it's Francesco. Lastly, we have the improvised comedy that the troupe of fools love to play.
Commedia Improvviso.
Now, these words, commedia and improvviso, are pronounced correctly, that's how you say them in Italian. The problem is that together they don't make sense, or better yet, it's a grammar mistake. Commedia is a female noun, so the adjectives should be female as well, hence improvvisa. English doesn't have this problem because adjectives don't change depending on gender or number, so this makes me think that they just found an Italian word that sounded like improvised. And since on Italian dictionaries the entries are male, with the female and plural form right after by the way, they just used the word as they found it, without considering grammar at all. Literally, Commedia Improvvisa means sudden comedy, but what they probably meant should have been Commedia Improvvisata, which still means improvised comedy, but it makes more sense in Italian. Or maybe they saw that there has been a specific Italian theatrical company that recently proposed the Commedia all'improvviso, in which they improvise classic themes from the Commedia dell'arte, and in this case we would be talking about the name of a real project of an Italian troupe, but slightly modified. Now I'd like to talk about something peculiar. When we got to the lighthouse and then later in the game, we heard Andreas talking and we all heard his extremely obvious Italian accent.
I stood before the sentinel statue, asking if my suffering was really their will. But all I got was silence.
At first, it was cringe, I'm not gonna lie, probably because I try so hard not to speak English with my Italian accent to avoid sounding just like this, which is actually hard for me to do. But then I actually started to appreciate him and his accent, maybe because in my head he wouldn't pronounce Italian words incorrectly, and weirdly enough, he didn't have any Italian word in the script at all. I have tried so hard to find out who the voice actor is to understand if he's actually Italian as he sounds, or if he's just a genius who can perfectly reproduce that accent, but he literally doesn't exist anywhere, which is very disappointing, because I believe the names of the voice actors deserve to be known. Anyway, I'm really looking forward to seeing how his story unfolds, but above all, if he's ever gonna say words like Rinascita in a future update, or how he's gonna say them. Before the last chapter of this video, let's take a quick stroll across Ragunna to read the names of the people, so I can tell you how they're supposed to be pronounced. We have Modigliani, who was an Italian painter and sculptor by the way, and the GL sound is pretty hard to reproduce. Many Italian people can't even say it. I was one of them until high school when I just decided I had to learn how to say L. Anyway, again, it's Modigliani. There's Tullio, Riccardo, Ariosto, who was an Italian poet, Simone, Matteo, Paolo, Enzo, Adriana, Amedeo, Tommaso, Davide, Filiberto, Elisa, and Michele. These are all names that you probably pronounce correctly by default. Then there's Sergio, and this is the same problem we've talked about before. We don't emphasize the I sound, it's just there to turn the G into a J sound. But that I is silent, so it's not Sergio, but Sergio. Same thing goes for Giordano, not Giordano, Giuseppe, not Giuseppe, which is weird, but also Agio, not Agio, which technically it's not even a name, it means ease or comfort. Also not a name is Cosa, because it simply means thing, like the hero from Marvel Comics, the Thing, we call him La Cosa. There's also Fabrizio, which in Italy is a male name, but here he has been given to a woman. Rossellini, which is kinda wrong, the right name is Rossellini, and he was a movie director. and Pepe, which means pepper, but it's normally a name you would give to a dog, not a person. We also heard of
The Padrino.
and I thought that here at least we would have escaped the classic stereotype about mafia and Italy, but apparently not, since the Padrino is basically the godfather. Last but not least, Fenrico. It's not a real name, or better yet, without the initial F it would have been, because Enrico is a pretty normal name. I don't know why they added that letter at the beginning, but at least they pronounced the name correctly. To conclude the video, I have an experiment for you. Imagine you're the localization team tasked with telling the voice actors how to pronounce some Italian words that have been added into the game. You don't want to spend money on a cultural mediator because why would you pay someone who has studied for this specific reason all their life, right? You don't even want to pay for an Italian native person who could easily tell you the right pronunciation. What can you do then? Option A, go with the flow and decide on your own, because Italian people don't really exist so no one will notice. Option B, find a free website that's globally available where you can write the word, click a button and it will tell you the right pronunciation for free. If only such a website existed. Oh wait, it's Google Translate. If you choose Italian, write Rinascita and click on the loudspeaker.
Rinascita.
Voila! There you have it! Okay, let's try Roccia.
Roccia.
Oh, so that's how you say it. Let's see, Nuvola.
Nuvola.
Oh, that's where the stress goes. Now, honestly, I think they intentionally got the pronunciations wrong. It's literally impossible for anyone to butcher 90% of the words by accident, and I started to believe this when I heard Cristoforo, because there's no way in the world you get that wrong. Why would they do that, you might ask? Well, the only feasible explanation may be that it doesn't really matter whether people talk good or bad about the game. What's important is that it is being talked about. And that's it, I hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. I usually upload Genshin Impact theory videos and soon I'll make more Star Rail theory videos again, so if you're interested in them, consider subscribing. I will keep on playing Wuthering Waves, both because I want Brand and because there might be a follow-up to this video with the new updates, especially since one of the islands seems to be called Riccioli Island, and I'm terrified it's gonna become either Riccioli or even worse, Riccioli. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, over and out.